Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dollar-Coltman, joined by Elliot Tanti and Braden Dollar-Coltman. It's been a busy week. We've got lots we're going to discuss here. Before we do, it's obviously been a very busy weekend in Edmonton. Elliot, I know you had some quality time with the Pope. Anything you want to share? Any news from on high?
Not too much to report. You know, I think tomorrow is going to be the big day where they're shutting down streets. It's going to get a little crazy. I wonder where the Pope stays when he's in Edmonton. Would it naturally be the Hotel McDonald, or would they have like a private residence set up with a bunch of security?
The Super Western Motel.
I know in BC there's like a government house that's like dedicated as like a residence for the lieutenant governor. That's also got like guest rooms for like dignitaries, like when the Queen comes to visit. But I don't know, maybe there's something like that in Alberta. It's probably the isn't there like a Sky Mansion or something that
I think it's called built? Actually, I think it's called the Fantasyland Hotel.
Yeah, the Pope putting the Pope in either Fantasyland Hotel or the Sky Palace would be an interesting choice for sure.
And then, do you think if he's at the Fantasyland, is he trying out the Sky Screamer or the roller coaster? Which is the attraction that he gets first?
Well, I'm more interested in what theme room he'd choose to use.
Of course.
There's the race car one.
I would say the go-karting for sure. He'd pop in one of his little Pope mobiles. And, you know, they paved brand new roads on every road he's going to be on. And if the city was thinking ahead, they could have hit all of the residential zones with all of their potholes and fixed up the city nice and good.
It does feel like a very exorbitant amount of money to be spent on something. And obviously it's very important for the purposes of why he's there. But it does feel like, you know, whenever these kind of things happen, you start to wonder, where the heck was this money when we just had like normal everyday problems that could be solved with all of this money? Maybe we'll just leave that there as an unanswerable question. Let's move on. Here's topic one.
That was topic one.
All right. So just before we get to topic one, we've had conversations like this before in the past, and we just wanted to lead off with this again. This is a bit of a trigger warning and a bit of a listener advisory. The conversation we're about to have will involve conversations around sexual violence. If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual crime, there are resources available as simple as calling 911 and reporting it is the first step. But if you feel like that's too public, too personal, and you want something that's a little bit more confidential, there are resources. Obviously, being an Alberta and BC based show, we're going to focus on those. So I'm going to give you two numbers now. If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual violence in Alberta, the number to call is 1-866-403-8000. That's 403-8000. In BC, the number is 1-800-563-0808. And again, the conversation we're going to have will deal with sexual violence, conversations around sexual violence. So if you are uncomfortable, please skip ahead at this point. We completely respect that. You can move on to topic two. So there you go. We'll leave that there. Okay. So obviously, I think most people know where we're going with this. More unbelievable reporting by TSN's Rick Westhead. I mean, if there is not a more important journalist in Canada right now, I don't know who it is. Rick Westhead has continued to expose just scandal after scandal when it comes to, in this case, sexual violence surrounding hockey. First, of course, we heard and followed his reporting through the terrible situation surrounding the Chicago Blackhawks and the cover-up there, but that was just the beginning of what was going to be a very, very difficult year here when it came to the reckoning of the toxic masculinity bro culture surrounding hockey. Hockey Canada, which we have been talking about on previous episodes, of course, they are now under intense scrutiny, including that of the federal government, for their handling of what has been reported as a gang rape, to put it bluntly, in London, Ontario, following a sanctioned Team Canada event golf tournament that involved members of the 2018 World Junior Hockey Team. That investigation has now extended. We talked about this last week. Both Hockey Canada and the NHL are investigating that incident, as well now as the London Police Department is reopening their own investigation to look whether or not they handled it correctly, and moreover, if criminal prosecution should be pursued. On top of that, throughout the continuing discovery that is going on with this special committee, parliamentary committee looking into this incident and others, just unbelievable new information coming to light. The first being that there was a very similar incident that is being reported now surrounding the 2003 World Junior team. Again, a group rape is being accused. This one was actually filmed, and at one point that video existed. Whether we know it exists now or not, I believe, is what's in question, and that's part of the investigation. But that information, again, brought forth by Rick Westhead, continues to just expose that this is not just a small problem, but an exceedingly systemic issue within Hockey Canada. And on top of that, we also learned this week that Hockey Canada had a covert fund, several $1 million set aside under the guidance of the Vice President of Insurance and Risk Assessment, basically a slush fund designed to be used to pay off potential accusers, victims of crimes perpetrated by members of Hockey Canada. This is another, again, peeling back of this absolutely rotten onion, and we're learning more and more every day. I mean, at this point, does anything surprise us? It shouldn't. I'll go to Elliot first. I know you're probably going to start to feel like a broken record because this is the exact same conversation we had last week. But with this new information, I mean, are we not at the point where Hockey Canada, much like USA Gymnastics following the Nasser investigation, much like several other organizations that have gotten to this point, are we not at like the point of no return with this organization? Do we not just need to strip this down to the studs and start over again?
Well, I think probably, but not before we know everything and anything that's happened over the last 20 years. Because the fear that I have is that there are more allegations out there and more, awful things that have occurred surrounding this team, this organization, the U18 tournament in general. And so some significant work needs to be done here to find out, like, what are the facts? Like how many more instances of this are we aware of? How many times has someone been paid off? Who was making those decisions? And how many victims do we have here? I mean, this is, this is a pattern, and it's hard to believe that these are just two isolated incidents anymore. So yes, I think that's probably where we need to go from an end standpoint. But I think much more importantly right now is that we need to be going back, over the last at least 20, maybe 30 years of tournaments to get as much the information and facts straight, because where there's smoke, there's fire, and there continues to be these issues.
Braden?
I think even further beyond Hockey Canada, there's a great many players now that are in representing the National Hockey League and other leagues across the world. And I think that this culture, we're seeing the evidence of what this culture is and the dark cobwebs associated. And I think that further investigation and thoroughly mining that is going to be very important to actually being a step in changing that culture.
I mean, I think both of you are on the right path as far as what I'm concerned with, but I would take it a step further and say I do think that it's time to really start to have the conversation about how do we hold this organization, and more specifically the people who have been in the positions of power within it, accountable. So obviously we're at the beginning stages of these new investigations, and I say beginning because they're being reopened. This should not have been, I mean, we're talking about 2003. 2003, that's 20 years ago. The fact that this information is just coming to light now, and the fact that this was something that was filmed, that video was disseminated to at least multiple people, whether it's 2, 3, 4, I don't care how many number of people knew about this, people saw this, people knew this was wrong at the time and said and did nothing. Much like the Chicago Blackhawks situation, I believe that obviously the perpetrator of the crime is the first person we should be dealing with here. I think that that's true in this situation. The players who are responsible for these actions should be held accountable. There should be justice for these victims. But there is a secondary part to this that is equally, as far as I'm concerned, important for the credibility of this country and how we believe and support the sport. And that is the accountability of the other people. So we've talked about Tom Rennie, who has obviously resigned, whether he was already planning to resign or because he saw the smoke signal and knew this was coming. Regardless, Tom Rennie was in a position of power. But the other person that I would really like to have some answers from, who I have not heard a whisper about, is Bob Nicholson, who is now obviously responsible for the running of the Edmonton Oilers, which is close to our backyard. But the truth of the matter is he was the CEO of Hockey Canada for over 2 decades, including the period of time in question here. If this slush fund was started, here's the biggest thing. If this slush fund was started, that tells you they knew. As far as I'm concerned, that's guilt right there. The fact that this exists is an acknowledgement that they knew they had a problem. Because look, you don't start a volunteer fire department if there's no threat of fire. It just doesn't happen. You don't start, any of these kind of funds that are designed to pay off people unless you have people to pay off. And the only reason you have people to pay off is because there are people who are accusing players within your organization of committing crimes. And the other part that's frustrating to me is that this is not something that people didn't know about, and it's not something that people were sending up other flares and signals about. One of the players who's gotten a lot of criticism on Twitter, maybe rightfully, we don't know, and we're not going to sling mud, is Jordan Tutu, who has obviously come out and now denied his involvement in this. But I'm sorry, in Jordan Tutu's memoir, written 4 years ago, he talks about the rampant sex being had by members of that team in the locker room with girls. His exact words, and I quote, "It wasn't just one-on-one action," end quote. That's in his book. Now, whether that's him perpetrating it or he just acknowledging that it was happening, I'm sorry. No one in Hockey Canada read that and thought, we might want to double check on this. No, of course they didn't, because they already knew. That's where my frustration.
Double check for sure.
Knew.
Yeah. That said, Jordan, there is a difference here between consensual sex, which you can have,
that, Braden. I'm not denying that.
And somebody who was.
I'm not denying that there's probably lots of consensual sex being had. I'm not denying that. What I'm pointing out, though, is that there were enough red flags for Hockey Canada to have a slush fund. I would like to know every single transaction that account has been used for and why. And every single one of those cases, I would like to ensure that every single one of those cases was given the opportunity for that victim to actually seek legal justice and wasn't just hush money. That's what I'd like. And as a Canadian citizen whose tax money went towards this organization, I think we're all entitled to that at this point.
I think you're totally right on that front. And I do get, like, the slush fund, and I don't know if that's alleged or if it's been proven or where we're at with that. But, regardless, the alleged slush fund related to issues, legal issues related to the organization is completely inappropriate. It's grotesque, actually. That rather than dealing with the core issue here, that's the solution. Is that's the stuff that, like, mega corporations and slummy weird billionaires have. Like, this is for all intents and purposes a public organization. It's publicly funded, and it's not a charity, but I'm sure it's got not-for-profit status. And if not, doesn't matter anyway. It's receiving federal funding, and there's an expectation around the behavior of not only its employees, but the outcomes of what it promotes. And I believe its mission is not about necessarily generating the most successful team. It's about growing and building the game of hockey. Mm-hmm. And someone explain to me right now how that organization is doing so when we continue to have these issues. So I'm with you 100%. I find the slush fund is despicable. But that is a symptom, right? We have a much larger cancer in that organization, and you can't expel a cancer unless you know every part of the body that it's in, and we just do not have that information. I'm thankful for Rick Westhead. Not only what has he done with his reporting is sensational in terms of bringing these things to light, but I think he's now operating, he's seen as a person of trust, a person of integrity, and clearly victims are coming to him and feel comfortable doing that. So I'm grateful for him and his work. Um, uh, this is much, good for him for exposing this, but it's out of his hands now. Now, we need to start expecting something more.
But it's encouraging the conversations, which is great. And it's bringing those people who have no, one world championship team to the next championship team, to the next hockey team, to know, what's actually happening here. We from somebody who plays hockey, being in a locker room, even a rec league, I can feel some of that still in this locker room, this toxic nature. There's a culture here that is rampant, and it needs some serious change, and it's going to take a lot of work still.
Well, and I think that's what I'm frustrated by, is the fact that you've got an organization that has, as far as I'm concerned, sold Canadians like a false bill here at this point. Like we have to realize that this is so systemic that and this is not alleged. Elliot, Hockey Canada came out this week and acknowledged that they would stop using this investment fund for that purpose, acknowledging that they had been. That's the part of that's the biggest frustration for me, is that they've acknowledged the complicity of this organization has been using this fund to pay off accusers of crimes like the mob. And that is what bothers me the most, is that they were doing it covertly, that the parliamentary oversight committee that was responsible for funding Team Canada had no idea this existed. The fact that the board of governors is apparently unaware that this is happening, it was under everybody's fucking nose, and yet they still didn't know it was right there. And that's what bothers me, I think, on top of, again, as I said, this is two of these. The other thing that's also, and I'm not trying to play conspiracy theory here, but pay close attention to this part. We've heard about two so far. One is in 2018, one is in 2003. Both are in Canada. This tournament takes place predominantly on a North America, European back and forth schedule. How many of these incidents happened overseas? How many times has this specific tournament seen these kind of crimes committed? If it's already two, that's a pattern. Where's the third? Where's the fourth? That's what I'm saying. We could be just at the tip of an ugly reckoning. That is, if it feels bad today, just wait and see what else is coming. Because I'm telling you, at the very least, there's incidents of harassment, incidents of lesser crimes. There's incidents of all of that. I guarantee when you start peeling back how corrupt this organization has clearly been, and how they've been run, and how poorly it has been dealt with. I agree with you, Elliot. Rick Westhead should be commended. I think that when the dust settles on all of this, he deserves a lot of credit. I've already pointed out, I believe very strongly he is the most important reporter in this country right now in terms of the reporting he is doing. This has the potential to be just as big as the Dr. Nasser scandal in the United States in terms of how it's rocking an international organization. And I go back to my first question, and I will answer it straight up here. I believe Hockey Canada should be absolutely and utterly disbanded as it currently exists and rebuilt from the ground up. That's what I believe. I believe that this is so systemic. And I also expect accountability for those who knew and did nothing. That's where I will leave it there, for me at least. That for me is, that is the bare fucking minimum. All right, let's leave it there.
Topic 2 this week is brought to us by Busy Bee Vegan Skincare. Busy Bee is an all-natural skincare line dedicated to healthy, vegan, plant-based skincare and overall wellness. They offer a selection of handcrafted body scrubs, butters, and washes that not only make your skin glow, but smell amazing. Their unique all-natural scents include gingerbread, ruby grapefruit, caramel cake, and morning latte. So why not treat your skin to something fresh and all-natural? Head over to shopbusybeevegan.com today. And as a special bonus, Busy Bee is offering listeners of this podcast a 15% discount on your first order with the code OrdinaryPodcasts.
All right, topic 2. Let's talk about a very different side of the business of hockey. We've spent a lot of time already this summer talking about the offseason. There's been a lot of NHL news, trades, free agency, nothing bigger than what I am going to argue. This is my hot take for this segment. I'm going to argue is the biggest trade of the cap era in the NHL. When you look at the caliber of players being moved, okay? We've had the PK Subban, Shea Weber. Both guys were over there, Apex Mountain. They were on the backside of where their talent was, and the result proved
I don't know
right.
about that.
Taylor Hall for Adam Larson. There has not been a lot of like superstar for superstar trades in the NHL in the last decade. This is absolutely one of them. We all knew something had to give in the Matthew Tkachuk situation. Look, Calgary had taken Gaudreau leaving right on the chin. They had been the butt of every single joke, especially out of oil country, with Oiler fans being like, "Oh, we broke the Calgary Flames." Well, looky here. They went out and they traded Matthew Tkachuk, who had come back to them and said, "Look, I'm not re-signing as an RFA. I don't want to play here anymore." They took that incredibly difficult asset. They sent it to Florida. They got back Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, a prospect, and a first-round pick. And all they had to give up alongside as a sweetener was a fourth, conditional. Here's the thing. I'll let both of you answer this question in a second, but before we do, let me just set this up. Matthew Tkachuk, great player, probably top 15 player, and look, top 10 scorer last season. Jonathan Huberdeau was a finalist for the Hart. He was number 2 in scoring and arguably one of the top 5 players in the league in the last 5 or 6 years. Unbelievable blue chip player. Now, yes, he's on the last year of a deal, but I'm sorry, from Calgary's perspective, you want to talk about saving face? That is a hell of a deal. Elliot, from your perspective, initial reactions, Tkachuk for Huberdeau and all of the other parts of it, who wins this deal, Calgary or Florida?
It's tough, and I don't think we'll know for certain until next season comes around. I think Florida is still in win now mode, and they see Chuck as their ticket to being there. They're in a very difficult cap situation. But at the same time, Calgary has managed to save face in this situation, and maybe that's all they needed to do to win. It's been a very tricky 10 days for them. And so to see something get done, I mean, I guess you give the edge to Calgary. They've got, they've kind of solidified their future. They've got a big star, as you said. So yeah, I guess Calgary, it is very interesting. And I go back to this whole thing around, the last 2 off seasons have been incredibly fun because the cap hasn't moved at all. And when you've just got a baked in 5%, $5 million increase every year over year, it's led to some kind of boring off seasons, to your point around this being the biggest trade ever. And I sort of like what this is doing in terms of the pressure it's putting on teams, and the deals that they're being forced to make. So I think this is good for the game. And I think it's exciting probably for both cities. But in terms of who wins this trade, I think it's yet to be determined.
Okay, Braden, before I ask you, I'll let you kind of dig into who you think win, but let me rephrase the question a little bit from like a basketball perspective. When you look at Calgary, well, just hear me out. When you look at what happened just now in Calgary, Johnny Gaudreau sort of, I don't know, like leaving Calgary at the last minute. It sounded like all indications were he was still negotiating with Calgary up until the last day.
Yeah, but his family doesn't live there, and that was his priority from the get-go.
Sounded like he was still interested in, to some degree, or at least gave them the impression.
Sure, yeah, $9.8 million is nothing to sneeze at. But
right, at least gave them the impression he was interested in this thing. And then you have Matthew Tkachuk, who's now basically said, trade me or I'm not re-signing. Is this the beginning of the player empowerment era of the NHL? We've seen in the NBA. We've seen a lot of this in the NBA, right? Guys demanding trades. I don't want to play here. I'm going to go play somewhere else. I'm going to decide where I play. Is this an indication that this kind of trend might be beginning here? We haven't seen a lot of it, but look, this is 2 players from the very same team who clearly did not want to be in Calgary. Whether or not Gaudreau's departure really was a factor for Tkachuk, it probably made a difference, but he probably already had one foot out the door. Do you believe this is the beginning of a trend like that?
I'm not sure we're going to see it to the extent. I do agree with Elliot that the last couple off seasons have been fun as a result of the salary cap being stagnant, but I don't think, and in that it's because we've seen so much shift, so many moving parts. I think this year we've had just a remarkable amount. Like we're going to see some brand new faces on new teams. I'm not sure if we're going to see it to that extent of players saying, nope, I'm out. But I think with, this situation, I think Gaudreau knew he wasn't going to stick around. And I think Tkachuk also knew early on that he wasn't going to stay into the offseason. Yeah, I don't think we're going to, knock on wood, we're not going to see this happen with our own team in 4 years to come. But I don't think that we're going to see it the same way that NBA sees players moving around. As for the results of this specific trade, I think, Calgary saved face, but they're only going to have these guys for a year. I highly doubt they're going to sign long term. They have the money to, but
isn't that enough of a win?
They're just kind of on the edge. They're going to.
But I mean, from the perspective that you're about to lose Gaudreau, you're about to lose Gaudreau, and you were about to lose Tkachuk. You're basically in a rebuild. Now you're not. You've postponed it at least a year. You've lengthened the runway. You've given yourself an opportunity to win. And I'm sorry, but I can't guarantee you that 2 Canadian players don't want to play in Canada. I think that's the big wild card here that I don't think is fair. There's been a lot of punditry around like, wow, these guys are on a last deal. Why would they want to stay in Calgary? They might want to stay in Calgary because Calgary has got a shit ton of cap space now. Can offer these guys a hell of a lot of money, make them absolute kings. Both of them have played outside of Canada their entire careers. There's an opportunity for them to enjoy being in a Canadian market. Maybe that's something one or both of them is interested in. I'm talking about Uyghur as well. Look, they're different calibers. There's no conversation about that. But even just from the Jonathan Huberdeau perspective, sure, you can argue he's up from out east. McDavid's from out east. For half of the Canadian players in the league are from out east. The truth is, he may very much enjoy being the superstar of the Calgary Flames. We don't know that. So from Calgary's perspective, that's clearly a gamble they're willing to make. And for this year, not only to save face, but equally, I mean, they were number one in the West. They take the best player, arguably, off of the President Trophy best team in the East. You've plugged that into the team they already had there. He at least makes up the points of Gaudreau. I mean, the guy had 115 points this year, 185 assists. I mean, that's insane numbers for a guy who is clearly an elite level. Look, Matthew Tkachuk from the Florida perspective is a great get, especially, and this is also, here's an interesting stat for you in the cap era. It's the first ever sign and trade in the NHL. That's something we see all the time in the NBA. We have never seen this in the NHL. A guy signs the 8-year deal so he can get the extra year with the promise from the team that they're going to trade him to a team that he's on his list. They do that. They give him the 8 years. That guarantees Florida that they have a genuine top-line guy for the next 8 years. They can build their plan moving forward with that. They didn't know if they'd be able to afford Jonathan Huberdeau. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the most balanced trades I've seen in a very long time. Both teams come out looking really good. As Elliot said, we won't really know who wins until we see the results. But from Calgary's perspective, they get a genuine superstar back when both of their budding superstars leave. And Florida, I think Florida moves almost laterally. They probably lose about 16, 17 points, to be honest with you. If Matthew Tkachuk can play at the same level, that's all I would say. And he was hurt part of last year too.
It fills a couple other voids too. I mean, like Calgary needs a captain. So I think lots of what's going to happen with Jonathan Huberdeau we'll know in the early stages of this year. Like if he does accept the captaincy, which is something that Chuck wasn't willing to do, that might be an indication of him willing to stay. If obviously he signs a deal mid-season or this summer, then that's obviously, that's the ultimate indicator as well. I can't get over how much of a gamble this is, though. And the other thing is, Daryl Sutter has a certain way of coaching, a certain way of being. And no one's discussed this, but I wonder what impact that's had on some of this as well, too. And I think lots of what will happen for Calgary and Huberdeau's ultimate decision that he makes will come down to whether he jives with the coach, because it's a very unique style. It's not, he doesn't seem to be the typical NHL coach that's really focused on relationships and communications. He's an old school, tough guy. And I wonder if that didn't work for Johnny Gaudreau. I wonder how much that had to do with it. I wonder how much impact that had on Tkachuk, and Huberdeau is going to be the next one, right?
The thing, though, if you look at who Huberdeau has played under, I mean, now he was removed for good reason last year, but Quenneville is a very similar vintage to what Daryl Sutter is. I think Quenneville probably is a similar type of coach. Look, I would also argue, I think Huberdeau is undervalued, especially in the media, because of where he's been playing. I think that's a big part of it. I would say the biggest storyline for me going into next season is the fact that you are probably going to have the top three. Okay, maybe you throw Cale Makar or McKinnon into this conversation, but let's say at least 2 of the top 5 players in the NHL in terms of scoring and points playing in Canada. You have Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, and now Jonathan Huberdeau on Canadian teams. in the Canadian markets that have the kind of attention and media attention that hockey gets them.
Well, let's not forget Claude Giroux and DeBrincat in Ottawa.
Sure, but they're not in the same class right now. They're just not. I mean, I'm talking about I literally just named the 3 Hart finalists. They're all now playing in Canada. Mm-hmm. And that for me is a big thing. People are going to realize how really good Huberdeau has been quietly under the radar in Florida. And they're going to go, holy shit. I can't even tell you how many times this week alone after this trade happened, I spoke to people and they were shocked when they looked at his numbers because they just haven't even noticed them. They were like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? He was second in points. I'm like, yeah, guys, the guy literally has just been off the hook. And look, it's going to be exciting as Oiler fans to have that kind of talent coming the other way in Calgary. It's different than what they've had. They haven't had this kind of, like, Johnny Gaudreau was an elite scorer, but he was small. He was undersized. Jonathan Huberdeau is a big guy who scores. He's a power forward. He plays aggressive offensive hockey. He's going to be hard for any team to shut down. He will fit nicely into what Calgary's got going. And I want to point one more thing out. You mentioned Nazem Kadri, and I'm sorry, there's not a lot of center depth on this team. I'm looking at them right now. It's Mako Backlund, and then the next guy down there, Lindholm. Who's also a right winger.
Top one center. Okay. That was the best line in the league.
Great. That's 2. I got 2 guys. You got 4 lines to fill. Who's the next guy?
Kevin Rooney. They just brought him in. It's a 4th line. What are they going to put Nazem Kadri on the 4th line?
You've only got 3. You've only got 3 right now, Braden. Who's the 4th line center? Who's the 3rd line center? Who's this guy switching it into the second line? All I'm pointing out is
Lindholm.
Nazem Kadri is still in the wind, and there is $9.3 million of cap space still available to the Calgary Flames. They have a lot of money because they had a lot of money sitting aside ready for Gaudreau and waiting for Tkachuk, and it is all sitting there. And there are going to be free agents at the end of this thing going without a dance partner going, well, Calgary's got some money to spend on me. And they'll go and take a deal for 1 year, even if it's a 1-year deal. Because
but Nazem Kadri won't take a 1-year deal, Jordan. This is the thing. Nazem Kadri's not going to join this team if they know they're going to be dumping otherwise. If they're going to go into a rebuild, they're not. He's not going to stick around.
Who else is signing him?
The New York Islanders, the Seattle Kraken will be signing Nazem Kadri.
All right. Well, all I'm pointing out is we are currently July 25th, and it has.
I just don't see Naz wants term. I don't think he's going to look for it.
He might recognize that there's no dance partner at the term he wants right now, and he might want to bet on himself, and he might take a $5 or $6 million 1-year deal from a team like Calgary who has a genuine shot at competing again, and he may say, this is my opportunity to go out there, and if I do well with this team, they might give me a long-term deal, and if I don't, I can go and be a UFA again next year. I'm just
gamble after the guy just won the Stanley Cup.
I don't disagree with you, but why hasn't he signed already then? Why hasn't he signed? Because he's asking either too much money or there isn't a deal he likes yet. And I'm just saying there's deals to be had. $9.3 million. You're telling me Calgary's not going to spend a little bit more of that? They're going to go find options. They're going to be exciting. And I think for that reason, I still think Calgary wins this deal because of all of the intrinsic elements that this deal gives them. Gets them out of sort of the doghouse reputation-wise. It keeps them on a track of being competitive. They don't go into a full rebuild. They get out from underneath those 2 sort of toxic clouds surrounding those 2 players who clearly didn't want to be there. It may all come crashing down again on them next year. We don't know that, though. And they can't play the what-if game. They're playing the right-now game. And frankly, as a hockey fan, I like that.
It's unfortunate.
The team I cheer for
Benning's for sure on the hot seat, though. I mean, this whole season will be a challenge for Benning.
Any last thoughts, Elliot?
Blake Coleman, Jonathan Huberdeau, Uyghur, Trevor Lewis, all UFAs next year.
Sure.
So they've got to make something happen.
They're saying win now.
Or they've got to convince those guys to sign. Otherwise, they're in big trouble.
Okay, but here's the other thing I would say. Even if that's the case, you can't tell me that as an asset, Jonathan Huberdeau doesn't also get Calgary something incredible. They either re-sign him or they trade him for multiple players or picks.
And teams, I think, are already calling to find out if he'll be moved right now. And I'm sure that his asset value is still quite large, only at 1 year. That's how they got Ticklechuck, yeah.
All right. Well, let's leave it there for now. Obviously, we'll wait and see how this plays out. But probably, I would argue, the biggest trade of the cap era, but at least the biggest trade of the summer.
Do you like fast cars? Do you like when they race? Whether you're a seasoned Formula One fan or you've just discovered the rush of racing, check out the Pit Stop Podcast presented by the Ordinary Podcasting Network. Join Jordan, Tyler, and Braden each week as they recap every race as well as break down the biggest stories on and off the track all before setting you up for the next race in the Formula One schedule. The Pit Stop Podcast is available anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right, we're going to close it out with hats off. I'll go first. I'd like to tip my hat today to Canada's best golfer, Brooke Henderson, who won her second major. Her last major coming in 2016 at the KPMG LPGA Championship. It's been a few years, fought hard for her to get back up to the top of the women's game. She won the Avani Masters in France tonight, I guess today, tomorrow, whatever day it is in France right now. She just won it at the time of recording this here Sunday. So she won it Sunday. Look, a big gutsy win for her. It went all the way down to the 18th hole. She had to birdie the 18th to win it, and she sank a 12-footer. Brooke Henderson has endeared herself to a lot of Canadian golf fans as just one of those players who, no matter what adversity she's facing, there's always a big grin on her face. She fights hard. She plays well. A big inspiration to a lot of young boys and girls playing golf in Canada. We've had Mike Weir. We've got a couple guys on the PGA side, but as far as I'm concerned, she's the most important golfer right now in Canada, the best golfer in Canada. And look, she's a two-time major winner in the LPGA, and my hat goes off to her. I guess my visor, because she's one of those players who plays in the visor. My visor goes off. Elliot, who are you taking your hat off to this week?
Well, boys, I have 4 words for you. Long live Red Bull. My hat this week goes to Max Verstappen, who captured the French Grand Prix today. It's of course, my favorite team and my favorite driver, and so I'm thrilled about the victory. And, he continues to be the best racer, not just last year, as he demonstrated fairly and completely and without any controversy whatsoever, but he's backing it up this year once again. I don't care what the haters have to say. My hat goes off to Max Verstappen. And I'm sure if you're interested in learning more or hearing more about what's going on in F1, you can check out the Pit Stop Podcast on the Ordinary Podcast Network. I imagine you boys will be recording this week.
Yeah, it'll be out Tuesday. But before we do that, did you watch the race?
No.
No, I didn't think so. You're just looking at the stats and going, "Oh, you won again."
Too early. Elliot doesn't get up that early.
Elliot, he was
not on a Sunday.
He was 28 seconds behind Charles Leclerc when Charles Leclerc lost control and wiped out after a throttle pedal problem. Max Verstappen was handed a win today. It was the easiest win of his entire career. Now, I'll give him credit for one thing. He's been a lot less aggressive, which has put him in positions to mop up after other guys make mistakes. Give him credit for that. That's maturing. That's good as a driver. Buddy, you got to watch the race if you're going to take your hat off to him.
No, it just continues.
How very Red Bull, though, eh? Just take credit for it. I love it. All right, we'll move on from that. Very Red Bull.
I got the brand down. Okay.
So Red Bull. All right, Elliot or Braden, who are you taking your hat off to?
Well, in the name of handing wins over, I am tipping my hat off to the Toronto Blue Jays' very own Raimel Tapia, who had an inside the park grandy, gentlemen, a grand slam inside the park as the Toronto Blue Jays were handed by the Boston Red Sox a 28-5 piece. That is a baseball score. They were 3 shy of the all-time record. Unreal.
It was ugly.
It was so ugly. And you know what? They had a sweep of that whole series. Every game was ugly. That team is in disarray.
Look, we've all heard on the show, I don't watch a lot of baseball. I saw the score on my phone while I was at work. And at that point, I think it was 22 or 23. And then I looked at the inning and I went, oh my God, it's the 5th inning. These guys are going to murder them. And then I saw the score just tick, 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 tick. Unbelievable, really, for the Blue Jays. And after such a dismal month, where's all that scoring? Why don't they save some of those runs for games that are close?
Well, I think what happened is they had a very similar situation to the Oilers and Jay Woodcroft firing Charlie Montoya. New change of pace. They had a nice fresh break where Vladdy new skipper bounce. Vladdy didn't participate in the home run derby, so he didn't injure himself or tire himself out. There's a lot of energy going into the second half.
They had their own home run
wild
derby,
card. It's just the race for the wild card. No one's catching the Yankees at this point. So
what was the total? What was the final score in the home run derby? How many home runs hit?
Fuck if I know. I fell asleep.
Was it more than 28?
Oh yeah.
That,
it was
that
28
in the park grand slam though was a piece of work because the outfielder just lost it. What happened there? Did he just? That
he
looked
lost
like,
it.
Yeah, it almost looked like he'd been paid off by the mob.
Well, it was crazy because he had so much conviction running up to it, and then immediately kind of looked around while his teammates were yelling at him.
When it hit the warning track, he just turned around and started walking. He didn't even put in an effort. How do you show your face in the clubhouse after that?
He wasn't going to be the first to get it. Left fielder was already running that thing
down.
Oh,
yeah. You're right. You shouldn't even jog. No, don't put an effort in.
No, pull me. And he had some more other brutal errors in the last couple of games here. So
that was a mess. All right, that was a good one. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Braden, for another good week. We'll be back next week with more stories. As Elliot mentioned, you can tune into the Pit Stop podcast coming out tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Monday, it'll be out on Tuesday, the 26th. We'll recap the race in France. And also just a quick another little programming note from the Ordinary Podcasting Network. If you haven't already, please go check out Off the Shelf. It's a book club podcast. So if you enjoy reading and you want to read some new material, host Julia Coleman will introduce you each month. So as we get close to the beginning of August, she's going to have a brand new book. She's just wrapping up this last month. And in fact, we have a very special bonus episode. It's her very first month, very first book for her book club. She's wrapping it up. She'll do a review. That'll be out Friday. But she also has a bonus episode. She got in touch with the author of the book on her very first book, which is awesome. So she's going to have a great conversation with the author of that book. You should check all that out on Friday. And then next Tuesday, I think it's the 2nd, will be the introduction of the August book. So check that out too if you haven't. You can find out all of this and more on our website at the Ordinary Podcasting Network. So that's theordinarypodcasts.com. Thank you, Braden. Thank you, Elliot. As I said before, always a pleasure. That was Hattrick.
Hattrick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.